how it was that you came to be a school teacher?
In the hillbilly country where I grew up, there was only two things. If you were lucky enough to become a school teacher or work in somebody's kitchen. Those two things were all that young women, that was all there was. And that, of course, the roads were impassable in the winter time. I think it was 7 miles to Pittsfield. And of course, as I said before, Pittsfield and New Hartford and Summerhill were the three towns that we were acquainted with. But I wanted to be a school teacher, and my mother so wanted us to take advantage of our education. And now during World War I, quite a number of school teachers left their jobs and went to Washington, D.C. to work in government offices. I took a course of study, passed the examination, could have gone to Washington, D.C. with other friends and had a government job, but my father did not want me. He said, you put in time trying to be a school teacher. You've got a school. You've no business leaving it. So that's why I never got to Washington, D.C.
How did you get your credentials to be a school teacher?
Writing an examination in the county superintendent's office. We had to pass. We had to write on. I don't remember. There was, if we were, what do they call them now? Just grade school teachers. Of course, we had to write on all those subjects. Reading and writing and arithmetic and geography, and we even had a course in agriculture. I've got an old book somewhere. Agriculture. Imagine teaching in the country schools a course in agriculture. And history. History was the most difficult of all of them. Trying to remember dates and get everything right. And you had to make a certain grade. You had to make a passing grade. And if you didn't pass it, and I didn't pass in everything. I made good grades in some subjects and failed in one. And it was usually history. So teachers were so needed. The young men were being drafted, teachers, and they were leaving their schools to go into the service of their own free will. So teachers were scarce. And emergency certificates were granted teachers if they had made a certain grade and had only failed in maybe one subject. Those examinations were plenty stiff. And in the county superintendent's office. And they were graded by the county superintendent. And even in early country schools, all of the children's papers, their final examination in the spring, those were all graded in the county superintendent's office. That's how my first date with Mr. Wagner was going to Pittsfield to try to find out why or what could be done, if anything. For the girl that wrote on her paper, I do not know and I do not care. I do not know and I do not care. Well, there was nothing we could do.
This is one of your pupils?
Yes, yes. And her mother was so unhappy because she felt the girl should have had a passing grade. So she paid him $5 to take me to Pittsfield to examine the girl's papers. And that's what I found. I didn't know the county superintendent had graded the papers. I didn't know that. I do not know and I do not care.
And how did you come to meet Grandpa on that trip?
No, he came to Sunday school and church in Rockport, Methodist, and I guess and we'd have our parties, our class parties. But I never give him a thought. My sister was more stuck on him than I ever was.
Florence?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. We saw him going to Pittsfield one time, all dressed up and he was in a horse and buggy, I think. Florence says, "I'll bet he's going to see a girl." And I said, "Well, what's the difference? Who cares what he's going to see?"
Well, now back to your teaching.
And then, I don't know, after that trip to Pittsfield, he kind of got interested in me. So We started dating, and then Florence dated an older guy and married him.
Well, back to your school teaching. Was part of your training to graduate from high school?
2 years.
2 years of high
Only
school?
2 years. And if I had started 1 year, many a teacher graduated from the 8th grade, wrote on teachers' examinations, passed, and taught school without a day of high school. And then finally, of course, laws begun to kind of tighten up, and we had to have 2 years of high school. And 2 years was all there was in that community. So I went to Summerhill, man teacher. He wasn't. I don't suppose Mr. Shin ever had a day in high school when he was going to school. But he studied and he worked that all out himself. And I had 2 full years in algebra. 2 full years of algebra. Today I wouldn't, well, even the day after that, XYZ was just XYZ, that was all. Well, Mr. Shin worked all that out by one rule and taught algebra by one rule, you might say. Well, we made good grades. I think I gave my whole algebra book to somebody else. I don't think I have it. Never had any use for it. But there was some algebra in 8th grade arithmetic. Some algebra.
Do you remember any of your pupils in particular?
All of them, I think.
Uh-huh.
I think I remember all of them.
Well, do you remember any that were particularly, that stand out more than others for one reason or the other?
Well, for being real bad.
Or real
would
good.
That be one passed on 2 years ago. I didn't even know he worked in Quincy. He was 74 years old. And he put more gray hairs in my head than he did in his own. He was a bad one. He was terrible. It was him that smoked. And when I went and talked to his mother, the tears just rolled down her face. She laughed till the tears rolled down her face. Why, she said, he gets it out there in my garage, I raise it. So what chance did you have to try?
Who else do you remember?
You know, in those country schools, what do we call them? They call them exceptional children now. Exceptional, you know what they are? We call them a subnormal. And they went to the country schools. They didn't have a school that is anything extra. And I had one girl, 3 years. I did everything I could for that girl, but I don't believe she knew any more the last day of the 3rd year than she did the first day of the 1st year. She just couldn't learn. But we did what we could to help them. We just had to do that. And there was, let's see, there was 2 boys and 2 girls. And that youngest girl, the younger of the 2 girls, was average. She graduated from the 8th grade, and I think from high school. But that oldest girl didn't know any more. She just couldn't learn anything. It was just pitiful. Big, strong, healthy girl. But mentally, she was way down the line. And then in Rockport, I had another boy. Oh, he was smart. And he was paying tuition to come to Rockport to school. And that kid, that was one of the meanest kids I think I ever knew. He's gone on. I have their obituaries, find him in the paper. And then at Martinsburg, there was a young girl. Oh, she was bad. She wrote a nasty note, too nasty to even repeat. And I said, Ollie, why in the world? She just looked at me, just brazen. I said, I have a notion to talk to your parents. Talk to them, I don't care.
How about some of the good students? Did you have some students that were really bright?
Yes, I had some that were. There was one boy, though, at Tollgate. the last school I taught, there were several children in the home, and all of them were taken from the home, except that one, and put in a training school. And he was not in my room. That he was not. I wasn't teaching him. He was in the other teacher's room, but there wasn't room. They didn't have enough room in her room for him, so he sat. And he sat in my room. I was principal teacher, and she was the secondary. Well, she taught. She taught first, second, and third, and fourth, and there was just the two of us, and we handled 8 grades. And I just taught 6th, 7th, and 8th, and she handled the others. Well, that boy was subnormal, as we called him. He just couldn't learn, but he could cause plenty of trouble. I don't know why children are like that. And they were from that river town of Florence. And those children had to walk a couple of miles, and on the hard road, and they wore their coats in the schoolroom all day long. They had such thin clothing that they were, even with a good warm fire, they wore their coats. And I put those children's feet in a pan of cold water. They would come and be crying. Their feet was frozen and hurting so bad. And I just left off and got in a pan of cold water and had those children put their feet in that. And cold water, is good for frozen feet. And just let them sit next to the fire, next to the stove. We had the jacket furnace type of stove, and and I wrapped their feet in my coat. It would be so cold, and had so little. And then the other teacher came in one day, and she said, "You ever see a head louse?" I said, "No, if there's any around, I want to see them." Well, she said, "There's a little girl in my room, and something's crawling on her head." So I went in, and sure enough, lice were just crawling all over that little girl's head. So we dismissed school, and that is the study part of the curriculum, and examined all the children's heads and sent them home with a note. And there was quite a few of them that had head lice. Well, now in Quincy this past year, there's been quite a bit of a complaint about head lice in the schools. Well, coal oil is a pretty good remedy, and that's what parents used on their children's heads. And then there was something you could get at the drugstore, but if they couldn't afford it, they just used coal oil. And the children that we knew had the lice came back to school the next day with their heads almost shaved. We sent notes to the parents. Now, whether they knew or not that the children had lice, we never knew. But we found it out. And those children came back with their heads almost shaved. Just their hair cut just as short as it could be. One little girl, every hair was just rough with the nits. No live lice, but every hair. She had the live lice, and there they were, just rough, every hair.
Were you teaching during the flu epidemic in 1918?
Yes, and my school was closed twice. When the armistice was declared, my school was closed. It was in November, wasn't it? Yeah. November.
The armistice was in November of 1918.
1918. And my school was closed because of influenza, and people were dying all over.
Did some of your students die?
Yes. No, did he have... Well, he had appendicitis. He had a ruptured appendix, I believe. I believe that's what took him. I don't believe I lost any with...
But in the area around where you were living, quite a few people died from the flu.
People were dying all over. There was a family in Rockport, a prominent family, and one girl was a dwarf, and she was healthy, and she married and went to California. And her husband, a healthy, big, strong man, had influenza and died. And she lived through it. She had influenza, had it real bad, and lived. But the man that was strong probably wasn't as strong lung-wise as she was. Anyhow, he died. And even in the service, so many of the men in the service had influenza. There were no drugs, there wasn't anything. Nothing to nowadays there's serums and all kinds of help. There's no such thing as scarlet fever anymore. And
be pretty rare. Yeah.
In that first school I taught, there was a small library, and it was filled with old books. And periodically scarlet fever would break out in that school, and they destroyed those old books in that old chest, and no more scarlet fever, believe it or not. They say, I think doctors say now it doesn't, well, they said a long time ago that the scarlet fever wasn't spread by scales, but back there it was. Child would be burning up with fever, and the skin would be scaly, and those scales would get in the air, and others caught it from scales. And it was prevalent. And smallpox the same way. Smallpox was prevalent. Diphtheria, scarlet fever, whooping cough. I got whooping cough from one of my pupils. He had gone to a big public meeting of some kind, and they didn't know that he had whooping cough. But about the second week of school, he started coughing, and you just coughed. I tell you, you just couldn't stop. And that boy had whooping cough. There was one day that the coughing was, you just couldn't take it. I finally just wrote notes and sent the children home, and told the parents to keep them until they could do better.
When you were a teacher, did you room with families in the district that you were teaching in, or were you living at home?
Yes. Yes, and there was no way of getting out. You were there the week, the whole week, Sunday, Saturday.
You didn't go home for the weekend?
No way. It was just too far. Roads were too bad. It's unbelievable how bad roads were. Roads now that you zip over in a few minutes were mud holes. And wagons would get stuck, horses get stuck, and drivers would whip those horses and try their best to get out of those mud holes. Maybe they'd stay there all day.
Were there telephones yet?
Yes. The wall telephone. That old wall telephone, that's all we had. And when it rang, you take down the receiver, that's where you got your news. That's where you got your news. Yeah. A couple of women would be talking, another woman would be listening. And in all the homes, maybe a dozen of them, take down when the telephone would ring, and they knew who that number was. Take down that receiver and listen. And they'd talk for an hour maybe. Well, I started to say, when World War I ended, there were no televisions, no radios, only the yak box on the wall. And the telephone rang about 11 o'clock. I was visiting, and my school was closed because of influenza. And my aunt took the receiver down. She turned the telephone. She said, "The war is over." And that was the first we knew. The armistice had been signed, but the war was over. World War I.
Now, wasn't one of your uncles lost in World War I?
Uncle Alvin. All we ever knew was missing in action.
That was your mother's brother?
That was my mother's youngest brother, Alvin. He was, I've no idea just how old he was, but Missing in action was all we ever knew. When you asked me to find out, I wrote to Washington D.C.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
And I got the information. It came back to me that he was. That's all they ever knew.
And I just never saw
Missing
him
in
again.
action. Oh, so many were. Well,
Mhm.
even now, look at all of them they're trying to locate that was lost in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, same kind of problem, yeah.
And Korea.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how we got into those. The Korean conflict in Vietnam. There's quite a bit of mistrust, doubt. Well, it's quite a life for an old country school teacher. You have to watch them. There'll be in groups. There'll be a group of good-sized girls that you'd better look out. There'll be boys and girls you'd better watch out. You better watch them everywhere, even in the old outdoor toilets. See, that's all we used to have. And I've made boys scrub and clean up, rub the ugly, nasty words off the walls. Both boys and girls. Oh, you have to watch them.
Did any of your sisters or brothers, let's see, will any of your sisters become teachers?
Well, there were three of us. You see, there were three girls before there were any boys. And that third sister taught school 20 years.
Oh.
11 years. She taught school 11 years. And the one that lives in Huntsville, Missouri, taught school 20 years. So she gets a nice pension. They had to teach 20 years in order to get a pension.
Was your mother behind you becoming a school teacher?
Yes. Yes, she just did everything. We weren't allowed to have any boyfriends. No, sir, that was out. That would never do. They talked us out of teaching school. And they didn't like it one bit. They didn't like Joe. They were both my father and mother. My dad just rared. You chose him instead of me. Well, why not? Favored Joe more than him. Well, they wanted me to tell you, it took every dime I made to help them.
To help your parents?
Yes,
Oh.
and the family. Yes, I went home that first year with $1. My mother had bought butter, needed the $1. So I didn't have a dime left. I had to go out and work that summer. Somebody's kitchen. Now those were the only two things we could do. Teach school or work in somebody's kitchen. Well, I guess we were better off keeping busy.
What was it that your parents gave to you in terms of values or ideals or whatever? What would you say they gave to you?
Everything. Everything. Good. I owe my parents a great deal. Because they were careful of us. They watched over us, took the best of care of us, bought everything that they could for us. They did the best they could. And my father, $30 a month was a big, why, if a farmer would hire a hand and pay him $30 a month, maybe furnish a cow to milk. I think only one in my recollection furnished a hog for the one hog. And maybe my father worked quite a few years for each one. I believe it was 17 years he worked in the Shin families. There were three families, however. For those three families, they were all good friends. And my father worked for the three families around 17 years. Well, he didn't always get $30. 25, 23, or 25. Or finally $30 was that was a Magnificent salary.
Do you still think about your parents? Do you think back to...
Oh, yes. Yes. Yes.
Do you look at them differently now that you're older? Do you understand things differently as you look back?
Yes. Yes, I think most ever, don't you?
I'm beginning to, yeah.
Yes. Yes, that they knew best. That they knew best.
What year did you get married, Grandma?
23. March the 4th, 1923. 2 p.m. in the Methodist Parsonage, Vermont Street. Methodist Parsonage here in Quincy.
You were married up here in Quincy?
I was married here in Quincy.
Mm-hmm.
I wore a navy blue silk Canton crepe dress.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a black velvet hat with a lot of plumes. Black shoes. We returned to Pittsfield in the evening, and we lived in an upstairs apartment.
Did you have any kind of honeymoon trip?
No, Joe was had gotten a good job, and he had to be on that job. So I guess he didn't even have a car at the time. I think he had a car later. And then we used to get out and ride around a great deal. We liked to go over to Missouri. I always enjoyed going, just taking off and being carefree, going over to Missouri or parts of Illinois, and we really enjoyed that. But he was pretty much of a hand to get out by himself. I've kind of reasoned here lately the fact that he had no family. Maybe had quite a bit to do with his drinking a little more than he should, and he's going out more than he should. Sometimes he'd be gone overnight. I wouldn't even know where he was. Maybe he'd be in St. Louis. Maybe he'd be over to Hannibal. Maybe he'd be in Quincy.
Maybe just getting away?
Just out.
Did he seem to miss his family sometimes?
I think so. I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
But
yes.
probably didn't show it too
There
much?
There just wasn't anyone. There just wasn't a relative of any kind.
He must have been lonely at times.
He must have been.
Yeah.
We never give that much thought, but I have thought about it quite a lot since he's gone, that was probably the reason.
He's from so far away.
Yes.
Also.
Yes. And of course, after World War I, he couldn't hear anything as to their fate. Never a word as to what happened to them. Because they were taken, they were in camps and taken prisoners and, I don't know, just mistreated in so many ways. Oh, it's kind of nothing very interesting.
What's that here? Oh, yeah. These are notes you've made for Susan to put in her book
in
here?
this book, yeah. This is Arlene. A little bit about Arlene. We lived on West Jefferson in Pittsfield when Arlene was born. She weighed 6 pounds. Arlene weighed 6 pounds. Resembled me. Well, that's some of the information that's to be written down in this book for Susan. Your mother, Susan's mother.
Does it seem like a long time ago to you when you think back to your childhood?
Sometimes. Sometimes it seems such a short time. And then again, it'll seem like it's been a long time. Bill was kind of a hard little guy to take care of. It was we 3 girls and Bill. He was so hard to take care of.
Why was he difficult?
Well, he just spoiled.
Oh.
Just spoiled.
He didn't grow up that way, though, did he?
No.
Seemed to be.
No. Didn't seem to be.
Well, thank you, Grandma, for going into that.
Not very interesting. Very ordinary. How the world has changed since I was a little girl. I have to fill that out. They invented is one thing. They discovered. They succeeded in preventing. when man landed on the moon. I've got to fill that out. A time saver my mother never had. A time saver my mother never had. I'll have to make a list of that. And women today, movies today, dating today is different because I still like the old-fashioned ways of so-and-so. I think the younger generation is wiser about so-and-so.
Mm-hmm.
I think a woman president would be
Mm-hmm.
good or bad, which.
That'll make you
What do you
think things through.
What do you think?
About a woman president?
Yes.
It's fine.
Oh?
Sure. It just depends on the character of the...
Yes, here's Thatcher in London.
Julie
Doing
will
all right?
paste me against the wall.
Yes.
I think it depends on the character of the person and her...
It's ridiculous.
And her...
I see she has plenty of troubles, I think.
Well, sure, but
any president does, for that matter.
it would feel different to have a woman president. I suppose there'd be some adjustment, but...
Are you sure there isn't anything else?
Well, there may be, but I'll just call you up if I
Okay.
if I have any other. It was helpful today to talk with your sisters too, because they gave me some information that.
And my
about-
sister in Missouri
Mm-hmm.
could even do better.
Mm-hmm.
I think she'd have more interesting information if at any time I get to talk to her.
Let me just ask you about a little bit about your father. We talked a little more about your mother yesterday.
Now let's see,
Would
my
you-
father. I think Uncle Herschel and Uncle John were older than my father, and Uncle Fred was younger. But now Uncle Herschel had a stroke. He was in church, and he asked, when songs were requested, he asked that "Will there be any stars in my crown?" be sung. So they complied with his request and stood. And when he stood, he fell, heart attack, or a stroke.
Right there in
A
church.
stroke right there in church. Lived 3 days. They used to live. Nowadays they didn't continue to live. Nowadays a stroke, people that have strokes live indefinitely.
Mm-hmm.
But back there when Uncle Herschel was, and others, they'd live 3 days. Usually live 3 days.
Mm-hmm.
But they would be paralyzed to the extent that they couldn't make it.
Was your father a farmer?
Yes.
His whole life was working on
Was
the farm?
working on a farm.
Mhm.
Yes.
Was he gone during the day most of the time?
Yes. In the fall, I would stay home and take care of the younger children. My mother would go in the field with him
Mm-hmm.
and could shuck as much corn as he shucked. So she was paid and he was paid, made a little extra money.
Mm-hmm.
She raised chickens, and they'd wait till the chickens went to roost and then go sort them out
Mm-hmm.
and sell what they could get along without. She sold lots of chickens, and I told you the other day we had that little wagon,
Mm-hmm.
and she'd probably tie a dozen chickens, hens or roosters or young ones, tie their legs together. We'd put them in that little wagon and haul them 3 miles to the grocery stores, bought them. One time she sent us with a bunch of chickens, and she wanted some outing cloth. She wanted us to spend that whole amount that those chickens amounted, that is, whatever they were worth. She wanted that spent for outing cloth. Well, they came to quite a bit, and the lady that was in charge of the grocery store said, "She surely don't need that much outing cloth." Oh, we didn't think so either. So we bought a lot of other stuff. Mother didn't like that, I tell you. I think we got spanked for that.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't like it one bit. And then there was one other time, the grocerman's wife's mother was accused of greasing eggs. We grease an egg, it won't hatch.
Mm-hmm.
And My mother bought a setting or two of eggs, and when she got them home, there was daubs of grease. So she marched back to the store. She said, oh, she told them off. Well, Mrs. Wassel said, my mother never greased those eggs. That grease got on there accidentally. But that's all we ever knew.
Would you say your father or your mother was more strict?
Mother. They both were, for that matter. Maybe one was as strict as the other. When they told you what to do, you better do it. Like the time somebody, on her way home from the store, someone gave her she stopped to talk with a lady, and she had a ring, and she gave it to my mother to give to me. When my mother got home, I done something I shouldn't, and I didn't get the ring. My sister got it. So she was pretty strict. Pretty strict. But we never had any trouble.